Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com, here with some more Aether Revolt spoilers. Now I know there's a bazillion YouTubers out there giving just the spoilers, so I hope to offer something fresh and different. So hopefully you gain something from my sort of opinions or expertise, if I have any, on the spoilers and how they might impact my favorite formats. Right now I'm very focused on Frontier, so you might hear a lot more about Frontier than maybe in Standard or Modern. Speaking of Frontier, I was going to do some more streaming tonight, but I got caught up really looking into some ways to improve my stream. So I got stuck with OBS. Man, I need a tutor on how to teach me these computer things. Just can't quite seem to get them down for streaming. I've been watching a lot of other people's streams and noticing some layouts and some programs they use just to kind of moderate and add a little bit of spunk to it. So if anyone has some tips on how to do so, I would greatly appreciate it. One of these days I'm going to hire a manager. Anywho, let's get into these spoilers. Aether Revolt is an amazing set. So far we've heard a lot of hype about it. I am kind of on the hype train. I think it's a very powerful set. We see a trend now with the first set of the block being not as powerful in the second set. I think it's safe to say that the Oath of the Gatewatch was more powerful than Battle for Zendikar. Eldritch Moon was much more powerful than Shadows over Innistrad. And now Aether Revolt seems to have kind of the glue cards that really now is like, oh, okay, well this now makes sense in the Kaladesh. So this, I think we ended about halfway through January 1st spoilers, so we'll start off with the January 3rd, even though this is midnight. Actually, it's 11:30 Mountain Time right now, so it'd be 10:30 Pacific Time while these cards are spoiled. The first one is Shock, so we have a Shock in the format that can take care of early cards. I think this is a little more versatile than Galvanic Bombardment because it can do 2 damage to the face rather than just 2 damage to creatures. But as far as premier removal for most decks, they'll want the Galvanic Bombardment. So right now it's not really, unless you'd want more copies of the Bombardment type card, I think that Bombardment is better for removal. There will be some aggressive decks that will want this though. Now to our first juicy spoiler, and this is a card that seems to get out of control when you use it on yourself. So you can destroy X target artifacts and or creatures for each permanent destroyed this way. Its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until an artifact or creature card is revealed and exiles that card. Those players put the exile cards onto the battlefield and shuffle their libraries. So let's see how exactly each permanent destroyed is to reveal those cards from the top of your library. So each one. Yeah, this card actually does seem pretty busted. I'm missing something here because it's almost like Mass Polymorph. And so it enables some really degenerate things. I mean, you just reveal until you find one. And is it just for each permanent top of his library until an artifact or creature? So it'd be pretty tough, though, in decks. You can still run, like, only token generators, for example, and then have like only busted artifacts or creatures that this can hit. We've seen this type of strategy be used before in Polymorph or Mass Polymorph, or what are some other decks that do this to quite success. I mean, they've even been powerful enough in like Modern. So just killing your own token or even clue token at this point, if there is something that is there just, yeah, there's effects that just generate clues, and then you search your entire library, go through your entire library until you do hit the Emrakul or something like that, just a game winning. So I don't really, I'm not glad this card exists. I think it's going to lead to more just shenanigans, and I think that we need less shenanigans right now. But it's a very powerful card at Mythic, and I hope I'm not missing something with, yeah, those players put the exile cards onto the battlefield and shuffle their library. So you actually can kill a lot of what your opponent's trying to do, but that seems pretty silly. It does actually kill Emrakul for basically, 4 mana, and then they go through because it's sorcery speed. But I think that there's better ways to kill permanents. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that card. I don't like it as from a design standpoint, but it's going to be super combo, I'm sure, in both Standard, Frontier, Modern. Very playable. Alrighty. On it to the January 3rd. Now, here's some good ones right off the bat. The Renegade Rallier is very, very powerful in, I think, all of the formats. I think even going clear back to, I'm not sure if like Alurin wants it in Legacy because there's already ways to really do this to get back cards. But I even think this card is powerful enough in the Legacy format. It's 3 mana for a 3/2 human warrior. So both of those are very relevant in the Frontier format. There are warrior tribals and human tribals. Khans of Tarkir being a very big warrior theme, and then humans being a theme in the Innistrad, Shadows of Innistrad block. And so this fits that bill, but it also works very well with Court of Calling decks and Collected Company decks, and even Aristocrat type decks, because this will get back Azulport Cutthroat. And what really enables this is the new Revolt mechanic, which is basically Morbid on crack, because Revolt is whenever a permanent has left the battlefield. So that is clue tokens, and in this case for Frontier, that is fetch lands. There are a lot of enablers, even like if you flicker something, that actually considers a permanent leaving the battlefield this turn, and therefore Revolt will trigger. So when it enters the battlefield, if a permanent you control left the battlefield, return target permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less. Target permanent. So there's many busted things as far as permanents are concerned. This could be some of the puzzle knots you could get back if you're in energy. This could even be maybe splashed into Naya to generate some more energy and get a 3/2 blocker for Naya Marvel. But where this really shines, I think, would be in the more eternal formats, getting back even like a fetch land on the turn that you've used it, so it actually ramps you. It can ramp you, get back a card like a Blood Artist or Zulport Cutthroat, or even a Thalia's Lieutenant that has died that turn. It does seem very, very powerful. The power level on this card is pretty busted, and kind of combine that, especially with the Collected Company, so you fetch land to get your basic land to cast your Collected Company to get back something your opponent had to kill. Again, looking at Zulport Cutthroat or even Elvish Visionary, insanely powerful card. So I think this will hit all of the Eternal formats in one way or another, and we haven't seen a card really on this power level for quite some time. On to the next one, which is this Rogue Refiner. Gotta love the card. This is another card that is pretty powerful. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and gain 2 energy. So this is a 3/2 for 3. Again, this is a perfect body for being aggressive, for sure. Even a 3/3 for 3, or just 3 power for 3 is just above curve what Magic used to be. It used to be a 2/2 for 3 mana. And now to be playable, you have to have some sort of, like Spellqueller having a 2/3 body. This one has a 3/2 body. So yeah, it trades with like Copter and Spellqueller, which is very, and Reflector Mage, which is actually very important in this type of standard format. And it does give you the energy. So again, I think that Marvel might actually want this as a 3-drop. Its 3-drop is kind of weird. That Puzzle Knot ends up getting played as a 3-drop a lot of times, or just another Servant. And this can actually, it could even replace... I don't think it would replace Servant. Yeah, it could, because you're drawing a card. So that's one of the things that Marvel wants to do, is dig and for the Marvel or Ishkanash just to cast. And this gives you the energy and draws a card. So it's got a huge body on a 3/2. Didn't we see a 2/2, the Shaman of the Spring, the last time at 4 for a 2/2? And I think that, do we have one in the form right now that draws a card? I think we do, but I think it's a lot more converted mana cost. So yeah, it's... Again, this seems pushed, everyone's using that term, to be better than its predecessors. As far as gaining energies, it's one of the premier ones in these 2 colors for sure. It's right on par with the most of them. They're comparable. And then the drawing the card really puts us over the top. So pretty powerful card. The only thing that I can say about energy is energy gets, after this set, it just kind of stops. There won't be any other, well, I assume there won't be any other way to gain energy, because we're out of the Kaladesh environment, unless that the next set has to deal with energy, if they make this kind of sort of like an evergreen type thing. But it's going to be very hard to print subsequent energy cards. So as far as Eternal formats are concerned, energy will stop in its ability to... so I think that's one of the reasons why they're kind of pushing Aether Revolt, to make sure the energy is powerful enough for its standard time in the and Eternal playability. So let's go on to Tezzeret's Touch. This is in Soul Artifact 2.0. It comes out a turn later, so it's of course not as good as in Soul Artifact. That means it's also in a black deck. You have to have a black and a blue deck that utilizes it. But the good upside to Tezzeret's Touch is when an enchanted artifact is put in the graveyard, return that card to its owner's hand. So you don't lose your artifact. I think I'd rather have the enchantment to come back rather than the artifact. But maybe I can see that might be a little too busted. as a Rancor on Rancor for artifacts or artifact creatures, you can actually buff up an artifact's base power and toughness. So we're looking at the like Inkmoth Nexus type cards. So Tezzer's Touch could just be another like the 5th or 5th or 6th in Soul Artifact. Again, one of the things within Soul Artifact that people have a big problem with is when it dies, you feel like you get 2 for 1. So maybe this card doesn't feel that bad. If it ends up getting destroyed, you at least get your artifact back. But it just screws up your entire curve for like an aggro deck. So I don't think it's quite in Soul Artifact. I think that the difference between splashing a color and 1 more mana is make or break for a card like in Soul Artifact. On to Yahini Undying Partisan. I'm really excited about this card because it's been a while since we've had an Aristocrats Enabler, or a Sacrifice Outlet is what we like to call it. I don't know why we're still stuck on the Aristocrats, calling it the Aristocrats. It was just because most of the cards were Cartel Aristocrats and the Vampire one back in the day that had the Sacrifice type abilities. And this one is a legendary creature, so it's a little bit tougher just to jam 4 of these in a specific deck. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, so it's going to be a powerhouse in Commander for sure. And then you can sacrifice another creature to give it indestructible. So it's a sack outlet for Zulaport Cutthroat. You can then sacrifice all of your tokens in 1 turn. I think that this really shines my green-black tokens. I don't know if I quite want it in my green-black tokens, but it's definitely an option for the deck, because sometimes you do have multiple Zulaport Cutthroats out and plenty of cards or tokens out in no way just to finish off the game. So this can also protect other cards against like Declaration in Stone, but I think if they had a Declaration in Stone, they'd be targeting Yahini, and you cannot protect Yahini himself. That is where I guess the Nantuko Husk kind of has a bit of a buff or just an upside rather than Yahini. But this does have haste. I don't know. Maybe some in the Frontier, the Rally the Ancestors decks could want this card. I'm not quite sure that it will take Nantuko's spot. But in Standard, this does get very interesting because now we do have the sack outlets for both the Zulaport Cutthroat and the flip card that turns into a Zulaport Cutthroat. Reverse Engineer. Reverse Engineer is a great card with Improvise. I think Improvise is underrated at this point. Clues start helping to tap for improvised cards. So do cards like Prophetic Prism. So the mechanic, I think, is really, really good. And Reverse Engineering is just draw 3 cards. So if you have a clue deck, like a Tireless Tracker deck, a lot of the times this will just be 2 mana, draw 3 cards, sorcery speed. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. I think it's well-balanced, well-designed card. Mechanized Production. Mechanized Production is another card that I cannot stand here. It's just one of those, back to poor designs. I don't like these type of alternate win conditions in Magic. Maybe they're cute for Commander, but I actually hate them in Commander too. Does anyone actually like these type of cards in Commander? Because I think they just end up ruining a lot of Commander games just with the, oh, game's over. And this is how this one feels. I think it's got a little bit of a design flaw to say enchant artifact you control, where it should say enchant a non-token artifact, because then this just gets out of control of Thopters and clue tokens. I think that'd be too tough to get it to work with that kind of specification, because you need 8 of the same artifact, and it's just begging you to name clue or to enchant this on a clue. It's not even that terrible if you don't want to go for the win. 2, draw an extra card per turn. Nah, yeah, it might just be too weak. But Mechanized Production is I think it, even without the if you control 8 or more, would have been a cool mechanic, because this is, what is the card out of the Gate Crash card or Dragon's Maze? One of the two, the Mimic, Progenitor Mimic. During your upkeep, you got an extra token. I think that was perfectly fine. The game-winning condition on this just makes it feel... I just don't like it. I don't like alternate ways, too many alternate ways to win the game. I don't think it will happen that often, though, if you can go that many turns. But with the clues and servos, sometimes this will be a 1-turn, either answer it or die. And whatever. Alright, so Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Glint Sleeve Siphoner is a human rogue again. This had tons of rogues in it. Unfortunately, they haven't done anything for quite a while for the actual rogue tribal, though. I wish they would. We'll go back and visit Rogue Tribal. 2-1 Menace. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay if you do draw a card and lose a life. At the beginning of your upkeep is sort of a weird clause, because then it has to survive to your next upkeep. And then if you are in an energy deck, at least this gives you a way to use energy. It's a very, very vulnerable shell at 2-1. I mean, they're trying to do a Dark Confidant type feel to it, but I just don't know if this is going to quite be on the power level that it needs to be to see play. It's just too cute for what it does. If you could just pay 2 energy and draw a card and lose a life, I think that would have made this playable. But having to wait for your upkeep with that really, really narrow time to decide what to do with your energy, I think makes this card not as playable as it should be or could be, if that makes sense. So the Aether Geode Miner, it's a 2 mana for a 3-1. When it attacks, you get 2 energy, and then you can pay 2 to exile it. So this is the good old Flicker card. In standards of the past, these type of cards used to dominate, but they had a lot to do with when the magic was had a lot more control aspect to it, and creatures a lot weaker than they are now. So a 3-1 that just keeps flickering back, I'm not sure if that is going to be powerful enough. I definitely think this will go in. It does have to attack to get the 2 energy. Energy is sort of a renewable resource. In this case, it's a renewable resource with attacking. And then protecting it, I guess, on your opponent's turn to then exile and bring it back. So sometimes you will have to try to kill it twice. I don't know. It doesn't survive like board wipes, so it doesn't say return it to the battlefield under control in a turn. I think that might be a better route. One thing with this thing, too, is you can attack and then exile and then put it back for blocking, so it has this, like, pseudo-vigilance type feel to it. And unfortunately, it's a dwarf. Dwarf, I guess they're trying to push a tribal with now there's more things for Depala to hit. But I just think that it just falls short of yeah, really what I think that's going to take. People have talked about maybe having some combinations with this. I think all the combinations are way too cute with energy at the moment. I think there's just better things to do in Standard. And of course, if you go back in Eternal formats, it's just going to be too tough to assemble those type of combos. Countless Gears Renegade, 2 mana for another dwarf. This card I do like with Revolt. When you get a servo token, if Revolt is online, a 2/2, a great filler card for sure. So if you attack it with your 1-drop, it dies. You can then cast it and get a 2/1. This feels like the raid mechanic in this aspect. So maybe if this card had Flash, it's a common though, so you can't really complain about the power levels on par for common. If it had Flash though, it would definitely be more playable in Constructed. I actually do think that this one is playable in Construct. I do like it's an Artificer because that does make the Artificer tribal deck that I've been working on a little... Yeah, because you can attack it with your 1-drop and it dies, you get a 2/2 and a 1/1, which is on par with the power level of Pia Nalar, I would say. Because you're getting a 2/2 and a 1/1 for just 1 card. And then it will basically enable the Metalcraft type feel, the Aether... or that Kaladesh has with many cards that get some sort of advantage by having an artifact out, leaves behind another servo token. It's definitely one of those cards you're going to be drafting very, very highly, and I think it is on the power level 4 standard. Renegade Map. Renegade Map for 1 mana, enters the battlefield tapped, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put in your hand, shelf your library. Basic land, of course, it's no expedition map, enters the battlefield tapped. The thing I do like about Renegade Map, though, is it does enable a lot of... It enables Revolt. So it's going to be a good card in... Like, here you go with the Countless Gears Renegade, for example, right by it. It enables the Countless Gears Renegade next turn, so you cast this on turn 1, sack it on turn 2, and then you get a 2/2 and a 1/1. So in Limited, this is going to be a bomb of a card. I can already tell. There's a lot of things to do with artifacts, especially artifacts that cost 1. To enable a lot of the Kaladesh even strategies. And for Delirium, this is also a great way to get an artifact in the graveyard with not that bad of a downside. It is slow though. It's very slow that it comes into play tapped, so it requires you to wait an entire turn. And then it doesn't come into play. That would of course be busted if it did. So I don't know how I feel about if it's quite standard playable in the sense just to enable Delirium. We'll have to wait and see. I think it is, though. I think the decks that want to really push Delirium, this is a good one. Alright, on to the next one, which is Aid from the Cowl. Reveal the beginning of your end step. If permanent you control off the battlefield, you may reveal the top of your library. If it's permanent, put it in the battlefield, otherwise put it on the bottom. So, permanent base decks, which is green strength. This is a nice little card. I think that it could be I like this more in Frontier just because of fetch lands, in all honesty. But anything that can enable Revolt, this is quite powerful if you can get it to stick. And in a few turns, like, this hits lands, correct? Yeah, the permanent card you put on the battlefield. So this can actually ramp quite well. I actually do like this card. I think this is playable. 5 is a little tough because that's like competing for slots that are extremely powerful, like Ishkanah in the format at the moment. But this is going to be a headache for control decks to deal with. Anything they kill, I guess it's at the beginning of your end step, so it's not each end step, but it does feel like kind of like an Outpost Siege type card. Just advantage after advantage after advantage that you can really grind out your opponent. This is begging to be broken. Miracle type effects, of course not miracle that you're drawing, but it has like this. If you have things that can manipulate the top of your library, this can sort of be, again, 5 mana for modern. Little bit of a stretch for that to be playable, but I'm sure in the right hands, the right brewer, they can find a way to definitely break this card. But I don't think it necessarily needs breaking. I think that it's one of those cards that's a great sideboard option to bring in for those grindy matchups. On to the Aegis Automaton. Return another target creature you control to its owner's hand, 0/3/2. Good filler card for limited. Gets kind of fun with Training Grounds. Rishkar's Expertise, 6 mana. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, and you may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Unfortunately, this is 6 mana. This is incredibly tough when you want to be drawing cards or finishing off the game versus a